This is your Chargers linebacker, Dan Henley, and you're tuning in with Chargers Unleashed.
Welcome to another edition of Chargers Unleashed. Jake Hefner and Wolkenstein here with you from the LAFB Network. If this is your first time tuning in to the show, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button on YouTube. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Dan Wolkenstein, what's better than one victory Monday to start off the season? How about two? How about 2-0 for the first time in 12 years as the Chargers started off the 2020-2024 NFL season with a road victory against the Carolina Panthers 26-3. Dan, the Jim Harbaugh identity has now been fully established. The running game once again dominant, the defense once again swarming. Lots to talk about as it relates to this Chargers matchup. Obviously, opponents aside, Chargers don't make the schedule. You find a way to get to 2-0 and win these type of games that you should win on the road. That's what it's all about. You got a tougher test ahead, but the Chargers went into Carolina and handled their business and handled it soundly. Dan Wolkenstein, we got a lot to break down as it relates to this game. How are you, sir? I know you're feeling good. I know you're feeling good today. I'm assuming that Victory Brisket is currently on the smoker as it stands right now. Yes?
No, but it should be. It should be. Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about that victory, all things being said. And honestly, it could have been a lot worse. This game could have been in the high 30s to 3 if the Chargers didn't have some more
flawless.
We'll get to. That Raiders victory, though, is looking a little bit better now after the Raiders beat the Ravens at last second this week as well. Chargers 2-0, dominate on both sides of the football. Chargers offense, running game is insane. Offensive line is looking nice. Justin Herbert didn't have to do much. Still cruising to a victory. Had that thing in second gear the entire time. And wouldn't you know, this Chargers defense, as advertised. Again, you don't make the schedule, but through 2 games, they are as advertised. And Chargers fans are looking at going 3-0 versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. A bigger test to come, but so many storylines for this victory. And you know, it's been a while, Jake, since we've been like somewhat, I don't want to say bored, but we got to just kick our feet up, got to have our hands behind our head, and just watch an enjoyable Chargers dominating performance. It's been a minute since we saw start to finish, never a doubt.
Start to finish, never a doubt. And how about just without having to, hold your breath for a fourth quarter decision on whether or not the Chargers were going to win or lose the game?
You got to rest starters, Jake.
I mean, my goodness. I mean, like we said, not only has it been 12 years, but it's been a minute since the Chargers have done it in a way like that.
It's been a minute, and I'll take the L on this. While they were up 20-0, I mistakenly said, "When's the last time the Chargers were up 20-0 like this?" And of course, that brings back all of the memories of 27-0, and I was referring to the regular season, but I digress. When's the last time the Chargers finished a game up 20-0 and then ended it like this?
That's fair. Look, Dan Wolkenstein was in his happy thoughts at the moment. We're not thinking about the 2-year-ago debacle against the Jacksonville Jaguars in the playoffs. It's a new regime, new era. So this is where Dan Wolkenstein's mindset was at. Totally understandable.
Yep.
And to those listening to the show that are not able to see this on YouTube, obviously, you can tell it's a different background that is behind Jake Hefner today. And if it sounds like I am in a wind tunnel, I do apologize. There is some work being done at Casa de Hefner that requires a lot of moving around, which then comes with a virtually empty house and an echo. So apologies.
It's okay. But Jake, let's get to this. I mean, the Chargers, by all statistics, dominated this game. The Chargers had 21 first downs to the Carolina Panthers 7. They had 349 yards of offense. The Chargers did. The Panthers had a whopping 159 yards total. They were 1 for 12 on third down. The Panthers' offense was, you name it, 219 yards rushing this Chargers team had. JK Dobbins led the way, of course, which we'll talk about. Only 3 penalties for the Chargers this entire time, and 36-23 time of possession 26-3. Quentin Johnston, JK Dobbins, offensive line. A lot of folks game balls. Deion Henley balled out. Shout out Elijah Molden as well. But Jake, before we get to any of the fun any further, let's talk about our friends. Pay the bills.
Yeah, talking about fun. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything online sports betting. Right now, you can receive a 50% free bet for up to $250 on your first deposit for anything from the UFC to baseball to Formula One racing. Side note, if anybody watched UFC 306 at the Sphere, it was an absolutely visually stunning experience on top of the fights that were out there. So make sure if you're going to be betting forward, go to betonline.ag. But BetOnline is every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game is over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or online with one of our 150 slot games. Head on over to the website today. Once again, that's betonline.ag to get in on the action. Just make sure you use that promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV for your 50% free bet credit on your first deposit for up to $250. BetOnline, the game starts here.
Jake. JK Dobbins.
That's a good-looking algebra formula right there. I like that.
JK plus QJ equals TD times 3. JK Dobbins, have yourself a day. Quentin Johnston, arguably, I don't think he's arguably, factually, best game of his career. Jake, 2 offensive players, imprints all over. What did you make of, we'll talk about the offensive line creating chasms for the running game. Gotta feel good for Quentin. Got a game ball in this. And against J.C. Horn, no less. Quentin Johnston gets 2 touchdowns, one of which on a go ball against J.C. Horn. Great adjustment on a ball that really wasn't thrown that great by Justin. Quentin comes down with it. And what is it, 50 yards? I think he has the leading receptions and yards on this team. 2 touchdown performance by Quentin. And you heard people on the broadcast talk about how big this was. Not just for the points, but for the trajectory of this offense and the career of Quentin Johnston.
Yeah, it currently leads all Chargers wide receivers with 8 catches, 89 yards, and 2 touchdowns through the first 2 weeks. So just like we all expected, it was going to happen. This is your Chargers leading wide receiver as it currently stands right now. You got to feel good for Quentin Johnston, Dan. We had talked about it last week when it was stretches of that Raiders game where, Quentin Johnston was out wide, tried to make a catch. It was going to be incomplete anyways. It was a better play by the DB in order to jostle that loose. So what did the Chargers do? They adapted, started using QJ in crossing routes. Dan, when we talked about the preview show leading up to this matchup last week, we said that we believe that the Chargers, Greg Roman, Jim Harbaugh was going to try more similar plays like that to get him out into space. But I said that they wouldn't shy away from him going deep and being the X receiver, considering that DJ Chark is still out. And lo and behold, both of those things ended up coming true in this game. That deep route, one-on-one, we've seen what Quentin Johnston was all about at TCU when he was in one-on-one coverage. Be a 50-50 type ball. In this particular case, as you mentioned, and I'm glad you brought it up, Dan, yeah, it wasn't the best ball by Justin Herbert. It was actually some adjustments that were made on Quentin Johnston to come back inside to make that catch for the touchdown, which was great. 29-yard touchdown. It's a great start for Quentin Johnston, again, as it relates to these 2 games and building his confidence. And then what do you do later in the game? Dan, it reminded me of Mike Williams on the 2-point conversion against Kansas City years ago, because there was nobody around Quentin Johnston when he did that crossing route in the end zone. I mean, he was completely free. Yep. So it's just like, if you really needed to see what someone wide open looks like, that was the play to do it. And so here you go. You got deep routes, you got crossing routes to Quentin Johnston, both of them resulting in touchdowns. It was just a great game for Quentin Johnston. And I do like the fact that Jim Harbaugh and myself and Dan, many others are included in terms of the criticism that has been brought on Quentin Johnston during his rookie year. There was a lot of criticism as it relates to Quentin Johnston. I think now, outside of the responsibility that Quentin Johnston has already taken upon himself for what took place during his rookie year, look at what good coaching, look at what good chemistry, look at what it feels like to actually find someone that utilizes your strengths to your advantage and puts you in situations to win. And I love the fact that Jim Harbaugh alluded to that in his post-game press conference because everybody in that locker room was feeling so good for Quentin Johnston to have a game like that. So
100%.
you got to feel good for Quentin Johnston off and on the field after that performance.
Yeah, and you said, look what that looks like. For those on YouTube, look at the screen. I mean, watching Quentin go through doing his thing, dancing. You got QJ doing his thing. You got JK Dobbins out there replicating it after the game. JK Dobbins, after his solid performance, was one of the first ones to call out Quentin needing a game ball. Got Hayden Hurst out there. I mean, offensive lines flexing. That's what this looks like. And we'll get to JK Dobbins here now. That's what this looks like.
Not pictured here is Justin Herbert, because Justin Herbert made a beeline to Quentin Johnston after that first touchdown pass and just give him a big old bear hug after that first touchdown.
Yeah, and deservedly so. And look, you have to feel good for Q here. And you know what he's gone through. For him to kind of have this, again, stacking bricks, he deserves the praise. Let's see it continue. That helps confidence. Again, leading targets as well in this game with, I believe, it was 6 targets. JK Dobbins, Jake, the other offensive star, before we get to the offensive line, which was dominant. JK Dobbins, post-game last week, said he was needing to do some more gassers to make sure he doesn't get caught on those long runs. He finished it today or yesterday.
I'd say he worked on that.
Yep. 17 carries, 131 yards, 43-yard touchdown. Flipping over, folks. JK Dobbins doing his thing. And you could ask JK, he'd say the same thing. You cannot do what JK is doing without dominant offensive line play. And that's no hyperbole. This offensive line is dominating in this, especially in this game. You can say what you will about the Panthers. Again, Chargers do what they're supposed to do. We're not used to seeing this. This is one of those "what am I doing with my hands" moments for Chargers fans.
Well, Dan, you're talking about we're not used to seeing this. I alluded to it last week, the last time that the Chargers had a single player rush over for 100 yards and have the defense hold their opponents to 10 points or less. It had been a long time since we had seen that stat. I don't know the last time that the Chargers had back-to-back players, back-to-back games with one player going over 100 yards. It's been 6 years since that's happened. It's been a while. It's been a while since something like that's happened. More importantly, Dan, I'm surprised you didn't even bring up this question yet, but did JK Dobbins win you your fantasy league this week?
He did not. Yes, he did from my bench.
And wait, what?
Remember
him again?
Yes, remember, I have a stacked running back room. I've got Derrick Henry, Breece Hall, and JK Dobbins.
And you said JK Dobbins.
I still won. He had like 3 points less than Derrick Henry.
So you, sir, are fortunate that did not come back to bite you.
But
JK
he
Dobbins won me mine. Yes, he did. In spades, he won me mine. So, again, important stuff's out of the way. No, sidetrack back to JK Dobbins. Dan, this performance arguably to me was much more, yes, degree of opponent. It's not the Raiders defense. This is the Carolina Panthers defense. But just in the ways that you saw, there were aspects of these runs from JK Dobbins that we didn't get a chance to really see and take note of during week one. Obviously, the offensive line, as you mentioned, was dominant in this game, creating these type of holes. But I felt like JK was running harder. I saw the patience in which he was finding the holes, taking his time to find the right. The Chargers were just seemingly running at will, and that was with both J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards. I expected that they were going to insert a little bit more of Gus Edwards, and he was getting his running lanes and getting some of those tough yards throughout this game as well. The Chargers just did not let their foot off the gas, and quite frankly didn't need to as it relates to the run game. So this will transition into a subject later. But in terms of this identity, whether or not you want to call it boring, mediocre, whatever it is, think about this for a second. I understand that everybody loves Justin Herbert. I totally get it.
Except folks in Miami.
Touche. And I know that there are some people a little bit that would want to see Justin Herbert doing more in terms of the stat sheet and everything of that nature. we've seen Justin Herbert play Superman for the better part of his career in the NFL thus far. We've seen it.
And can it look better? Obviously.
Sure, this is not flawless by any means, and there are a few things that Justin Herbert needs to clean up as it relates to this game. But the big picture is not the stats for Justin Herbert. The big picture is the win-loss record. As it stands right now, the Chargers are 2-0 for the first time in 12 years. And they are doing it on the backs of this run game, which has just been so impressive to see it this dominant out of the gate. Dan, remember when we saw Austin Eckler bust off a 100-yard performance against the Miami Dolphins in Week 1 last year, and we all thought this was Kellen Moore. This is a running game that's now going to be established and be part of this unit to help Justin Herbert. And it turns out we never even sniffed anything close to that for the next 16 weeks. That was just an anomaly. That was just a one-off. And the running game never was able to be filling the stat sheet the way it was during that first week of last year. Now you've got 2 weeks of not only a dominant run game, but one player doing it. One player doing it. But you still have a complement of running backs that you are able to establish this identity with. As you mentioned,
and real quick, you mentioned the stable. 17 carries for $131 for JK Dobbins. 18 carries for 59 yards from Gus Edwards. Justin had 6 carries for 18 yards. Hassan Haskins, shout out, 3 carries, 11 yards. 219 yards rushing on this Chargers offense. That'll do.
Yeah. I think it's more so, Dan, that the offensive line is paying off dividends this early.
Yes, and the part that is fun as you go back and watch, and I put a couple pictures up as I was kind of going through and watching all 22 stuff, is seeing how comically good this Chargers offensive line is looking. And I put out a couple stats. Rashawn Slater, second best PFF grade in the NFL, according to PFF, behind just Andrew Thomas, I believe. You saw them starting to get clever. You're seeing Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater stacked up on the same side on a heavy set. You're seeing Scott Matlock out there as a lead blocker. Gus Edwards out there blocking for JK Dobbins. You're seeing Bradley Bozeman. I mean, you're seeing huge Grand Canyons of lanes for these running backs to go through. And oh, by the way, just 1 sack. And the 1 sack they gave up probably shouldn't have been a sack. Justin held on to it too long, in my opinion. We don't see Chargers offensive line grades in PFF that are all green. And bring that out to the tight ends, the running backs, and pass protection. They are establishing a new line of scrimmage, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 yards past where it originally started. You're seeing Will Dissly trot around trying to find somebody to block 10 yards plus down.
He had a better game.
10 yards plus because they got no one else because the offensive line took care of everybody else. The Chargers head coach talked about this being a position of strength and it used as a weapon, the offensive line. And you're seeing it now. And oh, by the way, Joe Alt still looks as advertised. And you go see what Max Crosby did week 2, makes you appreciate just how good Joe Alt was week 1.
The other thing, Dan, that I was hoping to have, and I expected to have better results than what it was from week 1, was the interior of the offensive line. Because during week 1, Zion Johnson, Bradley Bozeman, and Trey Pipkins, they were the ones that were giving up the most pressures to Justin Herbert in that game. Obviously, the Panthers being down Derek Brown helped tremendously. But overall, as a unit, much better performance from the interior offensive lineman in this game. So that was good. You saw it obviously give Justin the interior protection that he needed in terms of opening up those run lanes. Zion Johnson was getting downfield more often. And it was a good game to just see that, even if you want to consider this a get right type of game to take care of some of those little mistakes, this was the game to do it. And traditionally, when we would see the Chargers either play down to their opponents or, God forbid, even lose this game, that did not happen here. And it was a nice sight to see.
No. A couple of other shout-outs. You talked about the offensive line. We talked about Will Dissly and tight end. Both running backs, Gus Edwards, JK Dobbins as well. Love the wide receiver blocking in this game, by the way. And you talk about, following suit and the identity, which we'll talk about here in a bit. the receivers aren't going to have that many opportunities to catch the ball compared to years past, but they're still going to have opportunities to impact this game. And to see the 2/ sometimes through the whistle blocking from these wide receivers is awesome. You're seeing Quentin out there. You're seeing Semi Fehoko, which Jim Harbaugh talks about in his post-game presser. You talk about Ladd McConkey out there doing his thing. By the way,
say his name properly, Dan. Ladidi McConkey. Excuse me. Ladidi McConkey.
They are all doing the dirty work that is required for a physical team to impose its will. And so, look, Chargers offense was led by the run game, the offensive line. 14 of 20 for 130 yards, 2 touchdowns. You did have one interception where you heard Jim Harbaugh talk post-game, I think it was afterwards, where on the scramble drill, both tight ends went the same way versus going high-low, and Justin threw it to the high, and instead of having a low to throw to. They'll fix that. They'll clean that up. But otherwise, you're not used to seeing Justin Herbert's jersey relatively and figuratively clean and just ho-hum, be able, again, the fact that Justin Herbert is able to go 14 for 20 for 130 yards, and it should have been 40-3. Like, you'll take that. And again, there will be times where I believe Justin will have to put the team on his back, whether it's for an entire game, a quarter, a play or two. It's going to happen. But if you can go stretches where you don't have to do that, sign me up. Jake, any other last-minute thoughts on the offense before we get to the defense and kind of the major theme of just the identity of the head coach?
Yeah, you kind of said it there, Dan, in terms of moving forward with Justin Herbert to have games like this that from a stat perspective don't seem that impressive, but you're still winning the game in comfortable fashion. What else can you ask for, really? I get it from the whole standpoint of what we're used to seeing from Justin Herbert. But to your point, as the season goes on and the opponents change, as Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh have alluded to, they're going to game plan differently for each opponent week to week for what they want to go out and execute. And there will be times where we will need to see the old Justin Herbert in terms of slinging the ball, if it gets too competitive, and if it gets down to the wire where you need to have number 10 carry you to the finish line. The Chargers are going to have plenty of those opportunities to do that. And this wide receiver group is really going to need to step up in those moments along with Justin Herbert to do so. But where the Chargers have been without absentee support as it relates to Justin Herbert, whether we're talking offensively or defensively, you have that now. You can turn the switch on Justin Herbert anytime you want. Right now, through the first 2 weeks, you haven't needed to do that. But it's there when you need it.
That's a good thing, by the way, that you don't need that. Jake, I said it last week. Don't look now, but just admit the truth. And before folks want to go out there and say, oh, it was just the Carolina Panthers, and oh, it was just the Las Vegas Raiders, how many weeks did we see this Chargers team on both sides of the ball play down to competition? You talked about it earlier. The Chargers, sure, they did what they were supposed to do. That should still be celebrated. And if you're telling me that what they were supposed to do was dominate a Panthers offense, which, by the way, Bryce Young, breaking news, has now been benched for Andy Dalton after just 2 weeks. They held Bryce Young to 84 yards total passing, 90 yards total rushing for the game. 84 yards passing. I think that's better than what they were supposed to do. That was a dominant performance. Back-to-back weeks now, Chargers have gotten a collective and combined 13 points given up. EPA per play offense on the defensive side, third and fourth down is like off the charts. Good. Run defense, stout. Physicality, stout. Pass coverage, stout. I mean, it's supposedly bend but don't break, but it's hardly bending, Jake. The defense is carrying again.
I remember I said in last week's preview show, Dan, that I didn't expect the Chargers to pitch a shutout. But when it got to halftime, I was thinking and when I saw the third quarter start, I was like, are they going to do this? And ultimately they ended up getting a field goal. When you really dig down deep into it, Dan, yes, I understand it's Bryce Young and the Carolina Panthers. The organizational and personnel issues that are on that team are a long list. But still, as Dan pointed out, historically, could the Chargers have been overlooking this to look into the Pittsburgh Steelers the following week? You have the Chiefs the week following that. It not end up happening that way. Dan, you only allowed one red zone play for the opposing team for the second week in a row. You did the same against the Raiders in week 1. You kept them to 1 for 12 on third down, and that one did not end up coming until sometime in the fourth quarter. That's how dominant you were shutting them down for the majority of that game. And we all know that they're really, when you look at it from a 50,000-foot view, as far as Carolina's offense goes, there was nobody that was terrifying to the Chargers defense in this game. Let's call it what it is. So
Chuba Hubbard was probably the one guy that they were
probably the most dominant in terms of their offensive playmakers. Yes. I don't even remember seeing Adam Thielen getting a catch or let alone, I saw him get targets, but as far as a catch goes, I don't remember that coming until the late in the fourth quarter, honestly. Defensively, Dan, this is one of those games that, again, you stack bricks on. It was different playmakers from week 1 to week 2. Game Bowl to Deion Henley. Elijah Molden coming up with a big interception at that point in the game. You're still getting positive output from Joey Bosa now 2 weeks in a row. The interior defense is still doing what they need to do. Dan, I thought Kristian Fulton had a great game.
Great.
But he had a fantastic game.
I got nervous for a second.
When he went down?
Yeah.
Look at you, Dan. It's nice that you have acknowledged to say, well, I'm not really sure about what Kristian Fulton's going to do. And through the first 2 weeks, it's been pretty damn good. I think we'll talk about it here in a second, just in terms of some player acknowledgement. But to have the Chargers defense be one of the top defenses in the league in terms of points allowed through the first 2 weeks. Before the season started, Dan and I even said it. You don't need this defense to do a full-blown makeover from 32-1. You just need them to be average. Did any of us expect this? Because the week 3 opponent that you're going against is just behind you in terms of points allowed defensively. Did any of us expect this? I know that Dan and I have been lauding up Jesse Minter's defense, and rightfully so. But did we expect it with that much new personnel that you have on that side of the ball, along with a different coaching scheme, to come out and put up these numbers in this impressive fashion through the first 2 weeks?
No. Again, we expected it to improve drastically, but this drastically, nobody would have thought that. And again, it's some of the players that we're seeing, revitalized, right? Joey Bosa, another sack. Jake has a 92.6 run defense grade through 2 weeks, according to PFF, which is the best in the NFL among all edge and defensive line players. Also has the third highest overall defensive grade among all interior defensive line and edge players in the NFL, with a 91 grade, according to PFF. Khalil Mack balling out. Denzel Perryman, he had a few thumpers. Obviously, he had a sack on Bryce Young. Do you see that third down stop that he had?
Oh, yes.
In its tracks, ended it. Deion Henley, Junior Colston both had good games. I'm sure we'll hear more about Junior Colston. I think he had a hamstring injury. I'm not sure how bad it is, but Poona Ford is just a beast.
Tree trunk.
Is just literally excavator status, taking guys 3, 4, 5 yards back into the pocket. He just is an absolute animal. You're seeing Bud Dupree, 2 league it after it. You mentioned Kristian Fulton. Elijah Molden, so awesome to see him on this Chargers team. There was one play where there was one, I think it was when they got the field goal. He took one bad angle, and it turned into field position that gave up the field goal. Otherwise, nails. That everybody is communicating. They're all together. And look, you take advantage of an opposing offense that just isn't good. And their offensive line is good, honestly. And you're seeing some fun defensive fronts, and you're seeing some disguises and creativity and, continued adjustments and all that jazz. And there was no let up by this defense. And they carried again. And to have, again, the start of this game, Jake, was unreal. How in tune this defense was to start off this game. And hell, the entire game. Listen to this. Some of these series, first series by the Chargers defense, 3 plays, 8 yards, punt. Next one, 3 plays, -2 yards, punt. Next one, 3 plays, 4 yards, punt. Next one, 3 plays, 5 yards, punt. Next one, interception. Next one, 5 plays, 13 yards, punt. That's the first half. Next one, 6 plays, 40 yards, and a field goal. That's it. Next one, 3 plays, -5 yards, punt. Next one, 3 plays, 8 yards, punt. Next one, 12 plays, 40 yards, down. Next one, 4 plays, 7 yards, down. End of game. Like, you can't get much better than that. That was as dominant of a defensive performance as you will see in the NFL. And honestly, the 26-3 does not do it justice. It was so much worse than that.
Yeah, if it wasn't for Justin Herbert making a few uncharacteristic mistakes, the Chargers should have been up much higher than this. And they were moving the ball at will in doing so when those turnovers took place.
Yep.
But defensively, Dan, look, you take advantage of a very weak opponent, and I know you had this a lot more lopsided than I did when we made our game predictions last week, so kudos to you. But Jim Harbaugh was not allowing this team to lose focus. No. He knew that after they lost by 37 points against the Saints in week 1, that he had a feeling that there would be a bad taste in their mouth come week 2. There was no shortage or lack of focus as it relates to this team on both sides of the ball, in my opinion. They came in, they had a plan, they knew exactly what they wanted to do. And in terms of executing the plan, which is something that we have not said about this team in years, execution, actually doing what you say you want to do, they've done that through the first 2 weeks.
And you can thread that needle through the offseason with this new Chargers front office coaching staff, with the identity that has been established and them telling you what they're going to do, and they follow through and they execute. And so far they have been good on their word. Chef Ortiz chilling in the kitchen. You saw Joe Ortiz, Chad Alexander get game balls because of the guys that they've been able to find recently, Elijah Molden. And I'll let you take the reins with this, Jake, but again, through 2 games, this Chargers team, offense, defense, looks night and day different. And you have Jim Harbaugh to thank for this established identity already in year 1, game 1, game 2. You have to be excited.
Dan, remember when we were doing the episode? I know it was probably over a month ago, just before the preseason had started, when we were basically just saying, even without a full season under his belt, to look at the changes from 10 years of Tom Telesco to 5 months of Joe Ortiz. Now let's factor in a little bit of gameplay into this. The Chargers just 2 years ago had the most cap space that they had ever had in years. And Tom Telesco, who was frequently known as Coupon Tom, found a willingness to spend that on, at the time, big names. The return that Tom Telesco got on 95% of those signings, and this, of course, includes coaching schemes and everything else like that included, but the return on investment was not great. Dan, Elijah Molden's been here for about 2.5 weeks. Tart has been here for about 3.5 weeks. Your first-round pick, Joe Alt, is nails through the first 2 weeks.
Yep.
Churning the bottom of the roster, building it out. I love the fact that Jim Harbaugh, when he brought up Elijah Molden to accept his game ball, that he was shouting out to Joe Ortiz and that he brought up Chad Alexander to acknowledge, this is the guy who found this guy. Like, how did we get this guy just 2 weeks ago? And he's already out here making plays. I loved that. And it was
down your starting safety.
Seemingly, it was Jim Harbaugh. The way that he said that to me, if you go back and you just listen to how he said that, Dan, it sounded like he had no control over what that move was. He basically had just said, hey, we're going to sign Elijah Molden. Great. Cool. Bring him onto the team, and it's going to be great.
For basically nothing, by the way.
Yes. Here's the Batman and Robin thing that Jim Harbaugh was kind of alluding to in terms of building the team personnel. I leave that to Joe Ortiz and the rest of the front office. I'll take care of the coaching aspect. But the partnership, Dan, the dynamic, the results that are already coming to fruition in just a short period of time. This is what a good front office head coach partnership looks like. Now, I know when we're talking about things that we're not used to seeing as it relates to this Chargers team, you can go back through Tom Telesco, A.J. Smith, way back in the day. It's been a long time since you've seen something like this function properly. And yes, small sample size, I know. But just look at what is happening on the field. Look at the relationship between Jim Harbaugh and Joe Ortiz of what they have been able to do with this roster and this coaching staff in just a short period of time. It's really insane.
It is, and it's accelerated. And everybody talked about how Jim Harbaugh, he just wins. He just wins everywhere he goes. It's the truth. And again, we'll see a big test these next 2 weeks going up against the Steelers and the Chiefs. And you saw how the Chiefs won that last game. Again, it seems like this is going to be a test. But is there anything that leads you to believe that they can't rise to the challenge? Now, can they win both of them? Sure, they could. Should be expected? I don't know. We'll get to that. But look, as Jim Harbaugh said today at his press conference, this is the standard that, while we all say this is the standard that Jim Harbaugh sets, this is the standard that these players are setting for themselves, with the buy-in that they have and the competition and competitors welcome, all that jazz. This is a new team, a new identity, obviously. And this Chargers team, from top to bottom, is running with it, literally and figuratively. And so I understand some of the concerns or questions about getting the most out of Justin Herbert, or, maybe they need some more at the wide receiver position. I get the questions. I don't necessarily know if I agree with it, but I get it. If the issue with the Chargers going into week 3, if you told me this a month ago, the Chargers will be 2-0. Their offense will be largely led by the running game that has been dominant using an offensive line. Their defense has been dominant. The passing game has been a little rusty. Then they've won dominating fashion 2 games. I'd be like, yeah, I'll take that, because you know who the quarterback is. It's just a matter of time. So Chargers fans have a lot to be excited about. This is a new team, new identity. They're physical. They're medieval. They impose their will, and they don't quit. Was it perfect? No. Let's get to that just for a second here. Justin had a few plays that he wishes he had back. We talked about those already. On defense, special teams, Cameron Dicker is human. He missed an extra point, which I think that was the first extra point of his career that he missed. But otherwise, I think he's literally 100% within 50 yards since he's been in the Chargers. For the most part, this was a pretty clean game, aside from the passing game. But again, even that, it didn't need to be. There was never a test. It was like, cool, I'll just run it 60 times.
Take it, Dan. I will take a 2-0 start. As you said, Justin wants some of those passes back. Very even fortunate that there were certain turnovers that didn't end up happening outside of the interception that he threw. Happily, it sounds like everything as it relates to that roll-up that he suffered from that offensive line that he was able to walk away from that. When you have Emmanuel Acho talking about how tough Justin Herbert is,
you won.
I don't know what universe we're living in. All I know is that the Chargers are 2-0, and somehow Emmanuel Acho is now giving kudos to the toughness of Justin Herbert. Something's cooking in Los Angeles right now. I don't know what it is, but when stuff like that is happening, there's something in the water.
Yes. So again, Chargers identity shines through and imposed itself to a dominating 26-3 win. You saw starters able to chill in the fourth quarter. Lots of things that Chargers fans have not used to seeing that we are now seeing with this Chargers team for good reason. For good reason. So Chargers get 2 relative blowouts to start off the season. I don't think Chargers fans would have predicted that going into it. Next up, though, again, tough 2 weeks ahead for the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Kansas City Chiefs. But this time we can say this is a tough matchup for them too. And I think that's the piece that Chargers fans have been so desperate to be able to say is, oh, this is a tough game the Chargers have against them. When's the last time you've seen an opposing team look at the Chargers that way? And I'm talking physically tough. Not like, oh, it's going to be a tough win, but like, this is going to hurt. That's what I'm excited to get to. So as we break down the upcoming week against Steelers, it's going to be fun. Jake, anything else in terms of recognition, observations, game balls for week 2 win over Carolina?
Well, number one, my recognition that what I look like right now, I just look like a silhouette. Because I look like outside right now. I feel like the Smash Mouth song "Walking on the Sun" is what this basically looks like to me outside. So I apologize for all of this throughout the entirety of the show because I'm sure people are going to acknowledge it. But to your point, Dan, as far as the next 2 weeks goes, if we were in previous years and we were looking at Kansas City, you would just be saying to yourself, okay, the Chargers are going to have to make less mistakes, find ways to turn the ball over. It's probably going to be a shootout. Justin Herbert's going to have to be Superman. And if this trend keeps up over the next couple of weeks, I can only imagine what the whole narrative is going to be then, because it's going to be completely different if it's anything the way that we have witnessed over these first 2 weeks of the season. Especially going up against...
You got me thinking... I'm sorry. You got me thinking of Imagine the Euphoria.
Oh, here we go.
I'm not going to say it, but
I'm actually surprised that it took you 2 weeks of the season to bring that up. But I appreciate you kind of pumping the brakes on it and allowing things to develop before you decided to put that one out there. But Dan, Joe Alt is in for a big test coming next week against TJ Watt. Let's see what happens. Mike Tomlin doesn't give a damn how his team wins the game, regardless if it's Justin Fields or Russell Wilson or 6 field goals and no touchdowns. There's a lot of similar philosophies between Mike Tomlin and Jim Harbaugh in terms of how they want to run their team and get their wins. It's going to be a physical game next week. This is not the Carolina Panthers. This is on the other side of the spectrum. I'm excited that the Chargers are staying in the East Coast, considering that they're the most traveled team of any NFL team of this season in terms of where they need to go and when they need to do it on their road trips. I really like, too, what Jim Harbaugh said. We'll see what we're made of.
Mm-hmm.
Trying not to build up anybody's confidence, where opposing coaches may see like, hey, we'll see what they're made of. We're coming to compete. No, Jim Harbaugh says, we'll see what we're made of, because he knows how hard of a test it's going to be, and he needs everyone to be ready for it.
That's a good point. It's a good observation. Chargers win 26-3, 2-0 atop the NFL, the AFC West, the AFC, doesn't matter. They have the most wins in the NFL along with a few other teams. Only one of a handful of teams that can say they are still undefeated. Chargers fans can celebrate. They've got a winning team right now with a winning culture and winning head coach. Chargers win 26-3. I think that'll do it. Jake, you can find him at JT Hefner. Myself, you can find at DanW Sports. Thank you so much for tuning in to Chargers Unleashed. Again, hit that like and subscribe wherever you get it. We'll be doing another giveaway here shortly. But until then, I will talk to you next on Chargers Unleashed.